mindset control over attitude. This week with the Mental Wellness Act, with the Calculations Act, we want to continue to listen to the 97.3 calculation that acknowledges the mental state their country are calculated under the Computerized Act. And while we have listened the previous few weeks on the mental wellness departmental communication in the Hospitalized Act that acknowledges the responsibility that government leaders have to acknowledge the hospital database communication line in all accuracy, in all that the communication line respond to in the country that are supposed to have fair processes in acknowledgement to its responsibility under the office business that are also acknowledging then therefore the mental wellness legislative right? The right for countries to be mentally fair, to be physically fair, to be emotionally fair, to be financially provided for under the Computerized Act. There are the computer communication that acknowledges all the constructural parts that the countries are built on, right? Then we don't only today focus on the office build, but we focus on the complete country's constructural build that are a complete country structure, right? That we rephrase and structure when we educate and leading this generation, right? Where are our processes meant to be at in our years? How our countries constructed? How are our countries populated? What population group grew in the country the longest years in its existence, right? Meaning what countries people have traveled first to the countries, right? When we go into the history books and we learn that this one discovered this, that one has discovered that, then the Computerized Act calculates under the same calculation. The Computerized Act, like the Bible say, does not divert off of, it does not root off of how the country's construction calculates in how its population were built in its years, right? And while the population calculates in all acknowledgement, in all the computerized calculations responsibility that the computerized office have to acknowledge the computerized communication build that today are acknowledged in the hospitalized build, right? In how the hospital then acknowledges the country's population, right? In how the hospital then have been introduced to the country's population, in how the hospital's data board, how the hospital's computerized system acknowledges the population of the country, right? And when the Hospitalized Act stands today next to the Mental Wellness Act in processes that has to be fair in countries, in processes that has to be acknowledged in all responsibility in countries, in processes that has to be in a way that countries can find a safer route further on from where the processes were built on many years ago, right? Last week we rephrased on where the communication were built many years ago. This week we focus on what route are the communication working with us, what are the fair responsibility that we have to be informed in accordance to legislation, in accordance to all that legislation responds to when it gets to mental wellness, right? To its mental wellness responsibility, right? And when the computerized communication have been built so far in our years, right? And it can be calculated, the Bible says 2,000 years back, right, in its calculation. The Bible also then rephrased 1 billion years back in its calculation that it calculates the years that Jesus were walking the earth, right? And the Bible educates then that Jesus was then a human being, right? And in all its calculation and its fairness, in all that the Computerized Act introduces to us in our years, in all that the Mental Wellness Act have to respond to in our years, it calculates the route that our years are walking in, right? It does not only calculate the pace that we are walking on, but it calculates the route in all calculation that we are walking on in accordance to legislation, right? In accordance to its responsibility, in accordance to how the population, the people in the country, how the population then therefore respond to the computerized communication that the country are built on, right? And when the country have a responsibility to acknowledge the computerized communication that the country are built on, then the country have a responsibility to implement accurate and fair processes, right? Once countries decide to implement processes that are fair and accurate, then the mental wellness state in the country will be a fair state that people would be able to still walk their complete 100 years in its biblical calculation, right? And when the biblical calculation calculated many years ago, it acknowledged all that the computerized communication were introduced to mankind in its years, right? And when the biblical calculation calculates so accurately, as explained in Genesis 1 verse 7, me Queen Ribea, Elise, the 7 baby, the star communications, the under the sea communications, acknowledging all that were implemented and built on earth, then it acknowledges all that the computerized communication were introduced to us in our years and would then have an effect on us human beings in our years, right? Then when we learn that in all accuracy we can then all share and introduce in our fair 100 years, right? We can then all have our 100 years in all acknowledgement. Then it is a responsibility for legislation to uphold its legislative right when it gets to the mental wellness right, right? The mental wellness right that the Mental Wellness Act has to implement processes that are right, that are in all responsibility, that are in all acknowledgement, that the Mental Wellness Office has been introduced to, informations that the Mental Wellness Office have been introduced to in its years, right? And when the Mental Wellness Act calculation calculates in all its responsibility that the data analysis of a country's population are calculated once a year, and the accuracy of household circumstances are calculated next to that, and it also goes onto a governmental computerized communication database, then in all accuracy, in all responsibility, in all responsiveness, then countries have to learn to be legislatively acknowledging the right of countries to be right, to be fairly right, to be fairly under the principle fairness acknowledged in all its responsibility, and to be therefore legislatively right in all that the country have to legislatively acknowledge, right? And while legislation becomes today, we've mentioned in one of our previous videos, all that we do in our day, legislation becomes all that we find ourselves busy with. Legislation becomes all that we are exposed to in our day or in our years, or that we might be exposed to. Then legislation have a right to root and to unroot to that that remains right in its accuracy, right in its responsibility. And therefore today, with mindset control over attitude, mindset control over our reactions, mindset control over all that we do in our journeys, are the responsibility that the governmental official have to implement processes under the Mental Wellness Act, under the Calculations Act, that calculates all response in households, all that the communication and the mental wellness data board respond to, the legislative court of law, and today the governmental official house have a right to then direct its route and to find its route and processes that are right, that are acknowledged under principle fairness in all responsibility, in all legislative right, and in all legislative acknowledgement, right? And therefore today we want to then also include the sensitivity of the hospitalized database that we have mentioned previously. Once information on the hospitalized data board, where people are hospitalized in a hospital and are being manipulated, then it affects the mental state of our countries. It affects where countries find themselves at. It affects how information are then imported in the legislative parliamentary computerized communication office that today communicates to all human beings and all levels of responsibility. It communicates to us through television programs. The computerized communication in the government office communicates through us in our household responsibility. It communicates to me with regards to my work business communication line. And once the hospitalized communication line are manipulated in hospitals, like I've mentioned in one of our previous videos, Paarl Hospital South Africa, Middlemore Hospital New Zealand, they are manipulating sensitive information on those data board where me, Ribea, Elise have given birth in Middlemore Hospital New Zealand, and where my Queen Mum Universe and a George Philander that a Queen Mum Universe part of the computerized communication line have given birth to me in Paarl Hospital South Africa. And when the data board are manipulated in its calculation, and when my household circumstances are by the monthly pay week, by the second week, then the food already is not calculated in by the IRT's Calculation Act. Under the Calculation Act, that computerizedly calculates all that the governmental office have responsibility in our house on. And once our groceries are not calculated accurately, and once our groceries we buy on a monthly basis, and it does not even in this day keep us for the complete month, then there's a manipulation that includes Middlemore Hospital under the data board that Middlemore Hospital calculates our household's informations, and there's then therefore also manipulation that calculates in the Paarl Hospital South Africa, where Queen Mum Universe and George Philander was not only employed at, but has then given birth to me. And once such sensitive informations are manipulated in our ears, then government have a responsibility. We've mentioned in one of our previous videos to employ people that would not manipulate information, that are so kept in high sensitivity, that are so acknowledged in all accuracy, that have journeyed so accurately that me, Ribea Elise, me, Queen Ribea Elise, are born in Paarl Hospital, South Africa, under the computerized communication. There are the Queen Mum Universe computerized business office in all legislative responsibility, in all that the school communication introduced in its years, in all that school colors introduced, in all that the signals, the star signals, the under the sea communications, the communications that were built on earth were acknowledged in all its Queen Mum Universeness in South Africa, where me, Queen Ribea Elise, Genesis 1 verse 7, the 7th baby, were born in South Africa on the 22nd 1+1 office of 11 month 1983 in all accurate calculation. And I promise you, the Bible says God never gets anything wrong. The computerized God never gets any information wrong. In all accuracy of how me, Queen Ribea Elise, arrived in Auckland, New Zealand, in all accuracy of how I completed my human resource journey communication line in Auckland, New Zealand, that my evoke communication line opened in all calculation, in all responsibility. Then as governmental officials, we have a responsibility to learn how sensitive our governmental database are, our governmental computerized office are, how sensitive the information that we include on there are. What are then there for your sensitive houses in the country that you as a governmental official have a responsibility in your business office to then be responsible in all that you learn about different households computerized acknowledgements, right? And when governmental leaders learn that the household communication that are the computerized office that are building in a business office on this day find itself in all sensitivity, then governmental leaders have a right to learn how to be accurate and how to be sensible and how to be responsible when working on the computerized office that today are me, Queen Ribea Elise's computer in a Chinese country that are the office business computer in all acknowledgement, in all that were introduced, like my evoke business would say, like the Bible would say about my brother King Jacob, when Jacob awoke in me, Queen Ribea Elise's evoke business communication line, and when all processes are then implemented in all responsibility and fairness in our year, and when all processes that were imprisoned will once again get out of prison, and all accuracy of information will once again be acknowledged under the Computerized Act and under its responsibility. And while as governmental leaders on this day, we have a responsibility to learn the sensitive route that the information works with us, that the information are a computer that has got control over our complete human reaction, but the information walks next to us just like how we were introduced to the information in our years, right? Acknowledging all that the information introduced to us in our years, acknowledging Bia Versace, the update that has to happen in our years under Versace brand, that today acknowledge that me, Queen Ribea, that people in South Africa used to call Bia, have walked my journey on earth, that I have been introduced to my computerized communication line. Anna Prada, acknowledging that my Queen Mom Universe, Anna George Philander, that my sis Queen Antoinette were introduced in our years, acknowledging all children of the womb that were then therefore also acknowledged under the Anna Prada update. Why does governmental leaders have responsibility to do the updates in all accuracy and in all fairness? It's an acknowledgement to all. I've mentioned in one of the previous videos that governmental leaders have located and have accessed in the Star Communications, not limited to Television America only, but acknowledging Television America and its legislative responsibility, acknowledging all the communications that were then introduced to us in our years and that were then introduced to the complete communication line that acknowledges the Queen Mom Universe and George Philander Room School of Color Afrikaans Duitse Translation Journey, the complete communication line that are a computerized communication line that are not only a telephone signal that acknowledges me, Queen Ribea, Elise's mama, Queen Mom Universe, Anna George Philander School of Color Afrikaans Duitse Translation Journeys. My mama were Afrikaans sprekend, right? The journey walked its complete route. The color communication were completely acknowledged in South African schools, and the government of American White House have a right and a responsibility to acknowledge the complete introduction in all legislative responsibility to then therefore acknowledge Auckland, New Zealand, that I in these years find myself residing in under the same computerized communication line. And while government has learned so much about our star communications, about us in different parts of the universe, government have a responsibility to be sensible, to be responsible, and to be upholding their right hand. Queen Misana George Philander used to say, the responsibility, the onus belongs and those that have learned so much about the information and that should learn to implement it in all accuracy, in all sensitivity, and in all that they were introduced and acknowledged in that are the communication line under the Computerized Act. And while the Computerized Act does not and has not explained itself so much in our years, rather than the legislative court of law speaking, rather than the principle fairness under the legislative court of law talking so loudly, rather than the statutory law educating so clearly, rather than the human rights law educating so clearly, the Computerized Act have a right to be acknowledged in all that we have learned, that we respond on under its responsibility. And while today we conclude our mindset control over attitude, our mindset control over our reactions, the effect that the computerized communication has on our human brain, as well as on all that we decide to implement on our years. In all that we learned about the computerized communication, we have then a legislative right to implement processes that are right, that are fair, that's it today for me, Queen Ribea. That's it today for me, Queen Ribea, Elise, with mindset control over attitude, our mental wellness communication line over the reaction that we react on being